Jordan and his wife Carly are two of my favorite people in the world. They are sort of the best of everything. They are good people, great, strong ethics, and they are easy to like. But they also are really, really hard-nosed entrepreneurs that have really proven that nice guys can win, and that's something that you don't always hear. But Jordan is from St. Louis. Jordan and his wife, again, Carly, just had a new little baby. They had a couple small kids at home, and have been ramping up their St. Louis-based franchise over the last year. And it's one of the fastest growing stores we've had. It's just done really, really well. And the results were so good that we reached out to him earlier this year about another opportunity in the Boulder, Colorado area, which, as you know, is not necessarily next door to St. Louis. But Jordan's actually up in Boulder right now, and he is running that and kind of working through the kinks of the early startup mode. And will shortly, I think next week, head back home to St. Louis, because he spent the last few weeks in Boulder kind of getting the foundation set. So we wanted Jordan to kind of come on and talk about those early days in St. Louis and what all he learned from that, and then also what he's learning right now in Boulder. Jordan also owns a third territory that's yet to be developed, also in the St. Louis area, that he hopes to open later this year. Based on how things go up in Boulder. So, Jordan, welcome to our little group here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is great. I don't know if we didn't do this back in the day, so this is awesome. Whoever thought of it.
Yeah,
good job.
I did. It was my idea.
I thought it was me. But glad to see everybody here, and I don't know what we want to talk about, but I'm game.
Yeah, so let's kind of go back and give everybody a little bit of an idea of what you were doing prior to this. It's a little bit of an interesting story. Most people have these corporate America gigs where they're wearing white collars, and Jordan probably wore a few white collars, but he had a little bit different experience and more probably non-traditional than what most of our franchisees are.
Yeah, so I'll try to keep it succinct, but it's sometimes can be a long story, and I'm happy to tell it. So I was previously, before finding Two Maids and a Mop, actually a public school music teacher of 10 years in the St. Louis area, and had this. I grew up in a family where everybody was a teacher, and even my sister was a music teacher. And I kind of followed in her footsteps. I was really good at music, and that seemed to be the way to go. And I decided at age 18 that I was just going to go to college, study music education and jump into teaching. And I was really happy. I got a great job, and everything was going well, and realized that there were things along the way that were sort of drawing my energy into entrepreneurship outside of teaching. I started an a cappella group in high school and led that. I started one in college and I led that. I started one after I graduated college. It became like a professional group in St. Louis, and ran the business behind that. And that was like a pretty heavy gigging group where we did fancy corporate events and weddings and you name it. All kinds of stuff. I won't get into that. But anyway, what I was finding myself doing was I was always more interested in sort of starting something and growing it, and realized that, I was in my late 20s, maybe early 30s at that point, going, I think I need to actually jump into business and not teach for 30 years. Seeing my fellow teachers, my family, how the burnout can happen in teaching. And I felt like I almost had golden handcuffs on. It's how I describe it. I was glued to my 10-year teaching job, and I had this retirement growing, and it wasn't making a ton of money compared to, probably people in corporate America, but it felt good to me. But it almost felt like I was locked into it, and I really had no other options, even if I wanted to do something else. And I got kind of tired of that eventually, and it was like, you know what, I need to do it sooner than later. And my wife's family happens to pretty much all be business owners. So while my family is teachers, I married into a family where everybody was a business owner, and they kind of encouraged me, hey, why don't you look into franchising? That's something where you don't have to necessarily have a brand new idea. You just follow the model, right? You lock into something, you follow the model, they give you support. So if you've never operated your own business, it still can be okay, because, I'll tell you this, anybody who knows what teaching music is like, if you have any kind of familiarity with a public school music program, like let's say it's a choir or band, the teachers, We do it all. I mean, if you run, I had a program of 300 kids, and I took 80 kids at Disney World every other year on a bus and put them in hotels, and these were 13 and 14-year-olds. And if I can manage that and manage all the people, all the performances, all the parents, all the budget, all on my own, I was like, you know what, I can do a small business. And so it's unbelievable. I mean, if you really know what those people do, I'm not trying to get on a soapbox here, but we have a lot of talents, we have a lot of skills, and it kind of goes unnoticed, compared to people in corporate America. So I jumped into this thing called franchising. I found Two Maids and a Mop, and it felt like a really good fit to me because it's people. I'm a people person. It's service industry. And, some people say, are you ready to deal with kind of the dirty business of cleaning? And sometimes, the employees can be, a stress. And I'm like, you know what, if I was able to work with 300, 13 and 14-year-olds and all the different poverty levels and the issues that came along with that, and I was in a pretty low income school, I think I can deal with any stresses and challenges with the people in this industry. And it's not going to be 300 people. So, I jumped into it, and it's been the best decision I ever made. And I still do music on the side. Now I enjoy it actually so much more.
Yeah. So Jordan and I, along with the what we call Brand Ambassador Club, every year we just started this club last year. We induct franchisees that have strong performance, who are just really good and great brand ambassadors to us, not just to people like you guys, the franchise candidates, but also to franchisees within our network. Jordan is one of those guys that really, really works hard to not just grow his business, but to help other franchisees in our network grow their own business. So why don't you talk about what some of the things you've done? We'll kind of talk about what the ramp up period looked like and what some of the challenges are. We'll get to that. But I really think that it's important for everybody here to understand that when you join a franchise system like us, you're probably thinking, what can the franchisor do for me? And that's our job. That's our contractual obligation. And we do that. We take it seriously. But you probably don't think, well, what are the other franchisees going to do for me? And sometimes franchisees don't. They want to sort of live on their island and just run their business and not communicate. But others do. And Jordan is the king of the franchisees when it comes to, internal communication. He's done a lot of things that were outside the box that have really helped franchisees grow their business. So talk about some of those things, Jordan, with everyone.
Yeah, so I found myself on the phone with one of the field reps pretty much every day, probably bothering her too much. And, I got to a point where I'm like, okay, I got to stop calling her, and I got to really reach out to some of the other owners and make some connections. And I'm just one of those people. I'm not going to hide away. I'm just going to go meet people, talk to them, and get to know them. And I believe that, if someone's successful, then you want to find out exactly what they've done to be successful. And then, eat. And I've learned from someone else, this is not my phrase, but eat the fruit and spit out the seeds. So take everything you can get from everybody and then make it your own. See what fits with your personality, with your style, with your market, with your people, and then kind of turn it into your own thing. So I started reaching out to people and meeting a lot of other owners, talking to them about best practices, probably bothering them too much. And then my wife, Carly, said, hey, there's this really cool app called Marco Polo, which I've been using with some of the people that she's kind of a networker, and I've been using it with some of the people in my networking group. And Marco Polo is basically a video chat group. So you can just post videos. It's like having a giant text message group, and you can watch it whenever you want to, but they're videos instead of text messages. And you can leave videos there, watch it on your own time. If you want to jump in and, with the group and make your own video, you can, and saved in there. So I put together with Carly a little group of some fellow owners that I had met. I believe maybe some people from home office were on like the first group back in the day. And it started off kind of as a more inspirational thing, actually. Like, hey, how can we inspire each other every day to get through this, and what challenges are coming our way, and just kind of be more inspirational, almost like a mastermind. But then it kind of became quickly a best practices, because we're just trying to solve our daily problems and hear from everybody. So I've been involved with a few different Marco Polo groups, and I think it kind of caught on with a bunch of other people, and some other people in the franchise network started their own. I believe, Ron, if this is the way the story goes, it kind of started this way, and it caught on. And still today, you know, I'm involved with one primarily where it's got to at least have 6-8 owners in there. And we just jump on there, and it's a great way to, hey, you know, how do you guys handle this customer issue? Or how do you guys handle, you know, what are you guys doing right now with hiring? You know, it's just, I mean, honestly, it's something new every single day. And there's people that, you know, we've got someone in there, partial owner and manager of one, I think the biggest store in the country, pretty much. She's in there. She's been in this company for almost a decade, I believe. And then there's people that have just started a few months ago. And I love that interaction. I get really a great feeling of this, interacting between, you know, new people, almost like rookies, and veteran people in this company, and everyone sharing ideas. And so that's been a great thing. And gosh, what else? That was the main primary thing that I think helped me and helped other people.
Yeah, we heard, when we heard how successful that was, we decided we wanted to do something to mimic what you did, or copy it. And so we went on to create our own different Marco Polo groups with the franchisees. And what's really cool about it is you stay connected. You know, you're in Boulder, Colorado right now, but you don't feel alone, you know, because you can totally connect with someone in Florida or in Alabama or in California. And it's, if you wanted to talk to someone right now, you could, even though you may be in that office by yourself, you know. So I really think that we would have never known about it without Jordan, you know, bringing that to our attention. So let's talk about those early days. And that's what all these guys are thinking. Like, what's it going to be like to start this from the ground up? They've talked to most of these guys have talked to franchisees one-on-one over the phone at least, and they've heard everything about personnel and what those real challenges are. And we'll talk about that. But if you could try to remember those days, I know it's sort of a blur. It just all sort of happens.
Actually, I remember the first month pretty darn clearly.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. And you know, this is real life. So, you know, don't hold back. Be as transparent as you can be.
Sure. So they say to hire, you know, anywhere from, you know, recommended 3 people, maybe up at 4 at the most. You know, you want to make sure that when you open up, you got enough staff to work with. And you know, I hired 3 people, and we got to the first day. This is before we even opened. The first day of our last training week before we opened up with our field rep. And, you know, one of the girls didn't show up for the orientation. And I remember Colleen, who's been with the company for forever, she goes, "Oh yeah, that's totally common." I'm like, all right, here we go. You know, so we're down to 2 without even knowing about it. And what you find out is there's just things that are going to happen. And you know, while that was the first kind of, you know, issue that I had, you kind of just go with the flow and get used to these things, and you prepare and you make all these investments. But you know, I had 2 people, and then I had one of those 2 girls. Basically, by like the 3rd day, she was kind of calling out, and I would basically clean with my other first employee. Basically, clean houses for the first few weeks every single day while managing the phones. That's not, maybe it doesn't happen for every office. It did happen for Chesterfield in the St. Louis area where I started, and eventually found out I was very, very fortunate that my first employee, her name is Janessa. She was phenomenal at cleaning and phenomenal personality. And I quickly made her my training manager. I was like, I'm done training. You're going to train. And I love giving, if you can give those first employees any kind of ramp up and responsibility right away, say, hey, we really value you and you're so important to this company. And I just poured into her in that way. I think it really, I mean, she's still with us right now. We're almost 2 years old. So, and she's still with us. So my first employee, that's not always common, but you just pour into anybody. I can, coming from teaching, I see the potential in everybody. And so I quickly made her training manager, got in on the phones and was able to answer calls. And I did join some networking groups right away. If you can do that in your community, that really helps to jumpstart some business. Let's see here. It wasn't pretty. It took a while. I'd say the first 6 months or so was just kind of finding who's going to stick and who's not. And it's kind of 50-50 as far as employees go. But then you kind of, you start to build that culture with, grab 1 or 2 and start to build that culture with them. And like I said, you pour into them and get them a part of building your business. I made it more like it's our business right now. It's not just Jordan Black's business. It's Janessa and Jordan, and we had a few others. And, by about 6 months in, we really started to have a team or 2 that was really sticking around. And, to this day, I've got at least 2 full-time teams that have been with me for now well over a year. And then, what happens is you just, and those of you like Ron, and I think Tracy's on here, who've been with us for a while in the company, you just, you start to lose your emotion about things. You just kind of start to detach emotion from things because you're going to get all stressed and you're going to get all emotional about all kinds of stuff. Eventually you just kind of go with the flow. And I remember from the initial training, don't get too up, don't get too down. And I think that's a crucial thing to learn in the early days. I was the kind of person that's a perfectionist, and I wanted to make sure things were just going perfectly, and it's not going to happen. I mean, entrepreneur and starting a business on your own, that's not, if that's your expectation, good luck. I mean, you're going to just fail constantly. And I think it's important to find some mentors, like whether it's through Marco Polo, a group like that, or find some other mentors outside of even Two Maids and a Mop that can give you just fresh ideas. So I kind of hooked up with a business coach too, who had no knowledge about Two Maids and a Mop, but plenty of other information. And he taught me early on just to embrace all the failures, embrace the mistakes, because you're going to learn so much. And when things are going really well is a time almost to be worried, because it's like, well, you're not going to be prepared when there are challenges coming your way. So I started to really embrace things and say, hey, wow, we made some mistakes. Now we're going to get even better. And so if you can kind of have that mentality, I think it really helped me through the first 6 months or so. And by that point, we were just in a groove. And I didn't clean a house. I probably maybe cleaned, from months like 6 to 12, maybe a few houses. And after year one, I can't even remember the last time I jumped. I've been in homes, and I kind of jumped in a little bit, but I was never like having to be there to fill in. You just learn things along the way, be overstaffed, and always be hiring, and make sure you're not overbooking your schedule out. And that can be also challenging too. If you do jump in and you get all that networking, you can almost be overbooked too quickly too. So that's reality. Grow at the pace that's comfortable to you.
So looking back, and now that you're in Boulder, you don't have to look back. You're right square in the middle of I wouldn't say startup mode again, but pretty close to it. So looking back on those two experiences, what are some things that really surprised you, that both from a positive and a negative perspective?
Let's see. From a positive perspective, I'll tell you this, all the people are on the phone. I mean, they say that there's too much demand out there. There honestly is enough demand that we can't even all keep track of it. We can't even. So, I mean, I was just thrilled that the phone was ringing, that there were leads, that, that's a good feeling, right? And then you just kind of find the staff to work with it along the way. Let's see here. I could think probably more negatives at the beginning than the positives. I would say a surprise that caught me off guard a little bit was the fact that most employees don't give you the courtesy of letting you know they're leaving. That was a little bit shocking, even though I kind of was prepared for that. So just don't let that be a shock to you guys. Just be overstaffed and be ready for it. I mean, I'd say 1 out of 10 people said, I'm going to give notice. I don't know if that's the same for other people, but that's just a reality. And it's unfortunate. And so I would change my conversation in my orientation and say, hey, you know what? If you want to leave somewhere, if you want to go somewhere and get in our job, there's no hard feelings at all. We just appreciate that professionalism, but just letting us know, communicate to us. We feel like this comment, you go through all that. And I think it helps a little bit, but still at the end of the day, for whatever reasons, people are afraid to confront you. They're afraid to let you down. They'd rather almost avoid the conflict at all than to bring it up with you. So that's definitely something that surprised me. But, again, just kind of remove the emotion from it.
All right, so we're going to let some people ask some questions here in a minute, but I just got one more question for you. A couple more, I guess, actually. But one is, so you're in Boulder now.
Yes.
For just as a reference for everyone on the call here, Boulder was an existing franchise that had grown very quickly, but the growth was so fast that it created all of these really unintended consequences that created so much stress that the owner said, hey, this has been crazy, like Jordan said, in terms of demand, but I can't keep up with it. It's too intense. And so just a really unique opportunity for Jordan, even though he's in St. Louis, to purchase this business and sort of take it from where it was to where it's going now. So oftentimes in these calls, Jordan, I ask people, if you had to do over again, the startup phase, what would you do differently? Well, you're doing that now. You're living that again, and you're going to do it soon again in St. Louis down the road.
Yeah.
So what have you done differently in Boulder during these last few weeks that you wished you would have done differently in St. Louis when you were starting up?
Yeah, absolutely. The first time you're learning along the way, but by the second time, you know all the things that work and don't work. And so it's been challenging because I've had to go back and change some fundamental things about the way this office was running, with compensation and pricing and all that. But I know exactly kind of what the expectation should be. So that's 100 times easier than it was the first time. One thing, for example, is we've had to settle in on some pricing, and what everyone learns is that we're not meant for everybody. This company is not going to be everybody's cleaning service. We can definitely appeal to a lot of people and a lot of homes or even commercial businesses out there. But at the end of the day, you have to understand your business model. You have to understand your pricing. You have to understand the compensation level and what you're trying to, which employees you're trying to get out there, especially in a market like Boulder where it's a growing market. People are moving here. They're moving, and it's expensive in this county, in the whole Denver metro area. And so they're here to work, and it's competitive. There's a lot of businesses that are still opening and growing. And so, we've got to remain competitive, and to remain competitive, I've got to make sure the employees are paid sort of at certain wages, and then the pricing's got to reflect that, so that it trickles down to their pay. And so I'm without a doubt now, I'm 100% sure on what's going to work for us and what's not. And I think in the early days, everyone's kind of just fishing for any jobs, any customers we can get. But by the time you get a little more mature with it, you kind of know exactly what's going to work and how you communicate that to your potential customers and your pricing and your employees. So I think that's a major shift for me from the early days of Chesterfield. And I continue. We just raised our pricing in Chesterfield a little bit. I continue to talk to my manager there about, hey, that's going to work. That's not going to work for us, and we can feel confident about that.
Good stuff. So we're going to give some people opportunity. If you're on a desktop, you lower your mouse to the reactions icon, and you can actually give me a thumbs up. And if you want to ask a question, just hit that thumbs up, and I'll turn the mic over to you.
There's also a chat box that I got a message from somebody. If you want me to read that one out loud. So where are we at with number of teams? What triggers hiring another team, and pay for performance doesn't really work? Well, pay for performance absolutely works. Absolutely, it's a game changer to market that to your potential customer and to pay your employees that way. I mean, a little inside information: Boulder was not 100% doing pay for performance. They were inconsistent with it, and it really led to some poor margins, for the owner at the end of the day. And so, you've got to, if we're going to be offering customers fixed rates, essentially, then we got to make sure our pay is somehow fixed. That's where the commission and the pay for performance falls into play. If you pay hourly, for example, it's just not going to work. So let's see here. Number of teams. So Chesterfield, we were getting into 5 full-time teams right before COVID hit, and then that kind of paused some things. We're regrouping, recircling back. So we're about 80% there now from where we were before COVID, and Boulder is about 2 teams right now. It was about 4, but again, with COVID and when you have an ownership change, you have to change some things. You kind of have to cleanse the business a little bit. That's what I'm basically doing. And we're starting over in a very healthy way that we're going to be able to essentially make money and sustain ourselves. The territories.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
So Christopher in Texas there, I'm not sure if that was one of your questions, but I'm going to unmute you now, or you may have to do that yourself, and feel free to ask Jordan anything.
Hey, Jordan. I think I'm unmuted, but my question is, I think you said your store was open for about 2 years, and you had left the profession of teaching. At some point, I'm imagining that you hired a manager, or were you operating it yourself first? And how was that transition between hiring a manager? Because my preference, I guess, for me, for the moment, like I said, I'm still employed in the oil and gas business, and I would plan to have a manager from the get-go, and wondering how that experience has been for you, either the transition or getting a manager, and how things been going since.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't clear. So with my first office in the St. Louis area, I did drop out of my teaching profession fully and started from scratch at the office. And I was the operator, the manager for the first year. And right around the year mark, I started to actually, that first employee that I had who's still with us, I actually started to groom her to be our manager, so I can sort of direct my focus into hopefully opening up the next office. And so that process went very well. It didn't work out for her in the long term. She actually said, you know what, I like being a cleaner, I like being a train manager, and it's a lot of duties, a lot of responsibilities for the head office manager. So she went back into that and didn't leave our company, thank goodness. And I brought someone else in that's working out really well, who was also on our staff already. And she's been there for several months now in that position. But if you're going to go in, you know, and I don't know how much I should say about this. I mean, I've got my personal opinion. My personal opinion is it can be challenging to jump in to this industry, to this company, and hire a manager right away, and they're doing all the work and you're in another career. I think you have to be sort of flexible wherever you're doing. If you're working a Monday through Friday, you know, you're locked into those hours kind of job. If something happens at your office with your manager, something needs a change, and you're locked into another career, that might be pretty challenging. I think it might take some flexibility if you want to do that, you know, do both at the same time. That's just my take, because, you know, you're putting all that on your manager. And my personal thing is to get fully into this business, get into all the trenches, so I know every single thing. And so I can always, if I'm leading another leader, that I have the ability, I have all the, you know, essentially the experiences of doing all the stuff that they're doing, to be able to guide them and lead them. So, but that, I mean, I know it has worked for people. It wasn't the way I went about doing it.
Okay.
And right now in Boulder, I've taken over the operations of it on a daily basis, and I'm in the process of bringing on a new manager over here.
Okay. Mark Oates, would you like, I know you have a question, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, and I chatted this, and I think while I was typing, Jordan, you may have answered this question, but you said initially you had two full-time teams. That's 4 maids, correct?
Yeah, essentially to do the work, normal work, and the model, that'd be 4 cleaners.
Okay.
But you know, okay, go ahead, Mark.
Well, sorry, I was going to say, how many recurring homes do 4 maids are they able to do? You know, weekly or monthly, however you guys measure that metric. But what kind of return do you see with a team of 4, and how long does it take to get to that break even point at that scale? I'm sure you've got more teams running now, but just curious what 4 maids can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you know, we've got our recurring business, we've got our one-time business. I've tried to sort of measure that. And my best way to measure it is sort of in like monthly sales almost, that, you know, when we've got, let's say, 2 full-time teams working and they're pretty much maxed out, you know, in order for us to add more business, we got to have another team, you know, going. You know, we kind of have a number in our head of, like in Chesterfield, it kind of got to be about $9,000 a team, you know, so like 2 full-time teams, we can max out about 18,000. I had that number in my head. I don't know how perfectly accurate it was.
Mm-hmm.
But I just found that by the time I started adding the 3rd team, we were starting to break over that 20,000 point. And that was with our pricing. So in Boulder, it's going to be a little different because our pricing's higher. You know, it might be $10,000 a full team could do in a month. I don't know if that kind of helps gauge it. But of course, you're going to be growing that next team, and that next team's not going to be full yet. So there's kind of like that in between. You know, you're in the sort of 2 to 3 range, and always be overstaffed.
Yeah.
So to run 2 full-time teams, I really want 5 or 6 people on staff.
Gotcha.
And I'm still hiring. When I have 6, I'm still looking, you know. I mean, I had multiple times in my first year where I lost 3 people in within a week or 2 weeks.
Yeah, we actually sort of pivoted, and we used to always say always be hiring, but we sort of changed that to always be interviewing. That's and that usually leads to hiring, obviously.
Right. Okay.
All right.
Yeah,
so
sure.
The Whites, I think, would like to ask a question.
Hi, yeah. So how did you end up in Boulder? It was just an opportunity that came up, or I guess our concern is our home market a good market to try this in, and what was attractive about Boulder to you that made you want to take that on?
Yeah, Ron actually gave me a call. He kind of talked a little bit about the situation over here, how the owner was ready to get out for some, I think, more personal reasons. But I don't think there's anybody right away in the Colorado, region that they wanted to go to right away. And so I think maybe a few phone calls, some other owners, see kind of who was interested. And in Ron's words, are you able to still sleep at night or something like that? If you have own a business out of state. And I said, yeah, I'm ready for it. So I've got a pretty big, bold, courageous vision, I guess. It's not for everybody. And no offense, I wouldn't have, if he called about some other offices or other cities in the country, I wouldn't necessarily have jumped on, but I do like, I'm kind of an outdoorsy person. I like hiking. I've been to Colorado on a few occasions. I really love the area. So knowing a little bit about the market and how, such a growing area still, absolutely a prime market for two maids and a mop. I jumped in on it. So that's how I got connected to it. Now I'm still kind of losing some sleep until I get a manager in place here. We had to go through a manager change, but once that's all settled in, I'm actually thinking of doing more of a managing partner almost, where they're going to have a lot more stake than a normal manager would, because I'm so far away. I can't just like jump in. I want them not to just feel like this is a job that they could quit at any moment, that this is something that they're really invested in. So we're kind of exploring some other options. I know it's not in the normal model, but it might work for sort of ownership, but being in a different state.
And were the research you rely on to verify the growth model of that region? Like, what kind of data were you
I lost you there. Say, ask it again.
I'm sorry. What kind of data were you able to access to show that it is a good market?
Yeah, I think from home office, they helped me. They showed me the numbers. Like, we look at the total number of houses and the zip codes, of course, how the territory is drawn out. But then you look at that household, income, median income, the number of targeted customers, make a certain household salary a year. And Boulder's got great numbers in those areas. What the pricing could be, you see that there's a lot of people that are working and they're busy, which is in this market, and they make some money, then they're going to be able to hopefully have the discretionary income to hire a service like ours.
Thanks.
Yeah, and if I could add, if you're okay with me kind of jumping in there, Jordan, when we look at a market, we only offer the market if we don't think we can get to $1 million of annual revenue, then we just don't want to be in it. It's just not worth it to us. And so if we've offered you a territory, we think you can get to $1 million in annual revenue. And then the question is, well, what does $1 million, what does that mean? Like in terms of number of homes, clients, or whatever. Our goal is, in some cases, a pretty conservative goal. Probably in Boulder, this is a conservative goal that they'll trounce. But our goal is to net 75 recurring customers a year. Like you said, there's also a ton of one-time revenue that comes in as well that supplements the recurring work, especially early on. But when you think about netting 75, obviously there's 52 weeks in a year. That works out to roughly, not even, but roughly 1.5 recurring customers a week. And so the question you have to ask yourself is, can I, every Friday afternoon when I'm done, hopefully not Friday evening, but when I'm done Friday afternoon, did I net 1 to 2 recurring customers this week? And if you can do that every week, then you got your 75 plus, and that gets you well on your way to $1 million. So it's for us, like I said, in some cases that goal is so conservative that people say, why aren't you pushing us harder? 1.5's easy. And some people do, beat that mark, but that's kind of our internal goal. And we can talk, Wink and Kyle can certainly talk to you about the territory and what some of those economics look like in terms of demographics. We have a ton of demographic information and data that will give you a little bit better idea of can you get to those 75 recurring customers a year. So we got a couple other quick questions. David Meeker, I think you had a question about territories. We'll come back to that and let either Wink or Kyle talk about that. But Christopher in Texas, you did have one other question, I believe.
Thanks.
Yeah, Jordan, my question is, and forgive me if I'm getting personal, and don't answer if I'm pushing on boundaries here, but with your second store, just out of curiosity, was the first store you opened successful enough that you funded the second store from cash flow from that one, or is it a separate capital investment?
No, it's a good question. So, and by the way, this was kind of brought up. I actually bought 2 territories in the St. Louis region, opened up Chesterfield. I was going to open up this other one, and then the Boulder thing popped up actually right before I was getting ready to sort of work on that. And so anyway, so that one, the other St. Louis one, hasn't been developed yet. So with the Boulder or that one, I was about to open up a second one. I thought I was getting to a point in Chesterfield where it was able to basically, pay for my living. We were able to live on it, my family and me, and it was going to be basically, some more savings. And I thought Chesterfield would obviously continue to grow. Now, then COVID popped up like literally right in this time frame. So it kind of, we had to be very creative, and I'm not the only owner, obviously. You just had to be creative with finances during this time. But the way it was headed was I was going to sort of utilize, I had basically savings for, trying to save up for like a second office. So it wasn't necessarily that was able to fully fund the second office yet. My first office, that's just the case with me though.
Okay, thank you.
I probably recommend though, having enough to start having that first office be able to fund a second one if you're looking into it.
Okay, guys. So David, we can talk about David Meeker as far as territories. Those are usually defined by us, but there's certainly some mutual discussion that we can have that can refine that territory. We don't live there, where you live. So sometimes your personal vantage point can really help us understand the territory better. We're looking at it from just data, and we're also trying to piece it together like a puzzle almost to make sure that there's viable territory later on as well. But again, same answer that I gave the Whites. We're not going to build a territory that doesn't give you the opportunity to have $1 million of annual revenue. And I say $1 million, but that's not the goal. That's really just sort of the basic goal. We have a real expectation for territories to be $2 to $3 million territories, and a lot of these they don't all have that opportunity, but a lot of them do, especially in the more suburban markets that we're in, where homes are sort of on top of one another. And we can grow pretty fast because of that. Boulder is one of those that has really the sky's the limit. I don't even know what the number would be in terms of a ceiling, but it's certainly not just 1 million. I wish we could talk a little bit more about the financial situation there, but it was a really, really, really strong start there in Boulder and in St. Louis. And COVID certainly hurt us all. Maybe that's a great question for you, Jordan, without shedding too much of your personal situation. What have you seen in the last 3 months? What did during the height of the pandemic, and now I guess we'll call it the rebound, where we're kind of recovering from all that.
Yeah, not gonna lie, it's been a little bit of stress, but who hasn't been stressed from it? So obviously your recurring customers, I think, were some of the first to go and just hit pause because, hey, we got you on a regular basis. We're just going to stop for the moment, make sure everything's okay, and then come back when we feel better. Chesterfield had an extremely high recurring percentage, I believe, compared to some of the other offices. We were at different times over the last year, 90% recurring, which is a good thing. But when it came to COVID, we had probably in Chesterfield, I'd say, 2/3 of our customers on hold indefinitely for a little bit of time there. And like I said, we're about 75-80% back to where we were before COVID. So I'm happy about that. And there's just, some of them had to cancel for financial reasons of their own. Not sure if they're coming back or not. Some of them are still kind of on hold, just, maybe they're older residents and they're just a little bit sort of, fearful of everything going on. But a lot of them, a good majority have come back over the last month or more. In Boulder, it's a little bit more of a liberal progressive market, and not to get too political, but I mean, You can't walk in anywhere in Boulder County without a mask, and it's a law right now. Still is a law at the moment that anywhere in public. Now I can be in my office here in Boulder by myself with a mask, but they say if at workplace, if you have other employees coming in, everyone has to have masks on. So that's actually a law, and you can get fined like $1,000 for it. So basically, in this community, I think there's a lot more people who are really following the health guidelines, and so we've had even a higher percentage pause here. Since I took ownership in that time, like right before it happened, some of the customers, you know, I'm not even sure. I'm trying to kind of still catch up with them, but some of them may be related to maybe an ownership change. As far as I know, that's not very many, but you know, there's a lot of also financial reasons here. I've heard from talking to customers. You know, I've got customers in Boulder that are like, yeah, I'm not in Boulder right now. I'm in my New York apartment, whatever that means. So it seems to be a lot of transitional people coming in and working here, having maybe a little bit different market than Chesterfield. I think all markets are just a little bit different with how, obviously, if you watch the news, every town, every city, every state's a little bit different with how they're responding, how businesses are responding, which makes a little bit of you know, there's a difference there. But I'd say all in all, I'm confident that we're going to be back, and we have actually gotten, this is the news for Ron, we've gotten a lot of calls saying, hey, my cleaning service is closed or they're not working right now. We're trying to get some information about using yours. And that's a really, obviously sad for that service, but it's good news for us because we've kept our head afloat, and essentially we're taking over some market share. Even if maybe our sales are not quite where they were a few months ago, we know we're expanding our market share a little bit. So yeah, that's my story.
Well, Jordan, thank you for your time today. I always end with one really major question that in your case, you've sort of already answered, but we're going to go ahead and ask it anyway. But if you could go back 2 years in time and rethink this decision, would you do it again? Clearly, you've just done it again. But you know, are you happy with the decision to become a franchisee and a business owner within Two Maids and a Mop?
Yeah, 110% yes. To me, it was about finding my own freedom. Like I said, my old career, I felt like I was kind of locked in, like someone had me in handcuffs almost, and it was hard for me to get out. And a lot of people, when I did move over to this opportunity, they were really surprised, and they said, "Oh, you're really courageous." I think it's taking that step, that jump into it, and it's going to be challenging at the beginning, of course. But I mean, if you've got your vision set out, I'm really big into vision. So my vision is to be free, to have my own freedom, to live my life the way I want to live it, and the only way that's possible is to own your own business, in my view. So owning your own business, I mean, you sky's the limit. You create your life the way you want it, and it's not for everybody. It's obviously extremely, you know, the responsibility is all on you. It can be extremely challenging and stressful at times, and make you really think twice about some things. But at the end of the day, you know, I'm still my own boss. I live my own life, and what better way to do that than and again, it's about vision. My vision is to be with my family on the weekends and at nights, and to do that. And this business matches up really well with my vision there. So anyway, that's how I'd say it.
All right, Jordan. Well, we're going to test those music skills here at some point. Our brand ambassadors all went down to Mexico before COVID, and they had this little karaoke bar set up, and you know, they were singing like other songs that probably didn't have the same artistic quality that Jordan would have bring to the table. But we made it all the way until the end, and they cut him off at the very last. He couldn't get on stage, but we were gonna put him to action, see if he could pull this singing off.
Yeah, maybe at a MaidCon when we go out one night.
We'll do it for sure.
I have to have a few drinks in me. It's, you know, which isn't usually an issue, but to feel good.
Well, I'm proud to call you a business partner, Jordan, and tell Carly we'd say hello.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, guys. Nice to meet you all, and best luck with everything.